What's up, everybody? It's Seirea, and I've got something a little bit different here today. I'm going to be talking a little bit about some topics that I covered in one of my other recent videos on this channel that is called Just Let's Talk. And I have a special guest with me this time because somebody who saw that video was Ian Westermann, somebody who I've had the honor of being able to meet with in the past and work with. And it interested him, and we're going to touch on a few of those topics that I covered in that video in a little bit more detail, and he can shed some light on some things, because I'm still quite new to all of this. I didn't grow up in tennis, and it'll be really awesome to be able to have the perspective of somebody who's been in this a lot longer than me. So thank you so much for doing this with me, Ian. Thank you for kind of setting this up. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, of course. Yeah, I'm super excited about having this conversation. I really resonated with a lot that you said in that just kind of open forum, kind of video. You covered topics about kind of the culture of tennis and like different communities, like pockets around the tennis community, and the online tennis, space and community specifically. And a little bit about your own journey and game and development. So I'd love to touch on all those things. I've taken a big interest in following your story because you have you love the game so much. It's so evident in everything that you make and how you talk about it. And I love content creators, and it's so rare in tennis specifically. I think everybody loves content creators that are vulnerable and open and kind of wear their heart on their sleeve and tell you what they're actually thinking and feeling. And that's very rare in the tennis space specifically, which maybe we'll kind of get into that at some point. So anyway,
Sure.
Yeah, let's where do you want to kick things off?
What do you think? What do you think is a good place to start?
So before we started recording, you mentioned let's just dive like right into the deep end. There's a lot of judgment out. You were very what's the word? You're very balanced and even and trying to be like very nice as you described this.
Diplomatic.
Yeah, thank you. That's the fancy word. Yeah, you were super diplomatic when you described this. It seems like the tennis community online and maybe offline too, we can talk about that a little bit maybe, there's an edge to it. There's like a little bit of condescension, there's a little bit of judgment, rolled in there. Not everybody, of course, but what you were describing really well is relative to other hobby topics and other affinity like groups. I don't know. Yeah, I totally resonated with your description of how you always feel like you're having to defend, yourself, your game, your skill level, the rating, like whatever. Why do we have to do that? You want to start with that?
Sure. And I've been thinking about this ever since I became aware of some news. And to get into that, we don't have to actually dive into this topic, but I just want to ask, Ian, how's real tennis doing?
Well, yesterday I uploaded a video to my channel members. Unfortunately, we're going to go on a hiatus. One that's not, I can't really determine like how long it's going to be. We just kicked off the new MEP series, which I'm really excited about, and the general like tennis community is obviously really excited about it too. And so makes me sad to say that at the end of that series with Ben, we're gonna take a break indefinitely, and the goal is definitely not to never upload on that channel again.
Mm-hmm.
But for the foreseeable future, financially, it just doesn't make sense, and so that's where it's sad. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I did hear through the grapevine that was the case. And at the time, it sounded a little bit less optimistic, where it's like the phrase was real tennis is shutting down, and so that kind of like was the very clear cut sort of idea of like, man, it feels like this is over. And so that got me thinking about things where I was already kind of discussing and thinking about the tennis world when I was making that other talking video. And so I might go on a little bit of a ramble here. So that's a warning to everybody, and to Ian as well.
I've been warned.
I bring Ian in here just to make him have to sit here for minutes at a time and just listen to me rant-ish, although I'm trying to keep it not like that. But disclaimer about a lot of things. My views are my own here. Ian has nothing to do with any of this. These are just my somewhat less filtered feelings, and no one has to agree with them. This is just, these are my opinions, these are my views, and believe it or not, I absolutely say all of this out of love. And I'm going to start with a kind of general rhetorical question. Tennis doesn't really have any lucrative YouTube stars, does it? When I say lucrative, I mean channels with a consistent video output whose average viewership for those videos support a livable financial venture, which is all based around cold, hard numbers. Number of videos put out, number of views collected on each video, number of ads watched or seen, and so on. The most lucrative accounts I think I've seen are Tennis TV, the WTA channel, and the Grand Slam channels. And those are obviously some of the biggest official brands in the entire world for tennis, with ownership of a ton of the rights to footage of the world's most prestigious matches. All of them are in the million subscriber counts, except for poor Roland Garros with a 700,000 subscriber count, but that's not the point. The point is, okay, yeah, of course those outlets are going to get a ton of attention. That's expected. Then basically all of the other biggest tennis outlets on YouTube are way lower. Some 100,000 sub accounts still have lots of videos with massive viewership, videos with views in the millions. These tend to also mainly be accounts that make highlights of the world's best tennis, like Raz Ols, Wyvo RN Productions, Tennistic Productions. In that next echelon, the most viewed tennis stuff online is still the best pros in the world, but from a third-party retransmitted source. I used to watch highlight videos from these channels for hours and hours every day when I was in my tennis honeymoon period. I haven't spoken with these account holders, but in this second echelon, I already don't know if they'd be able to rely on this as full-time sustainment, not to mention the legal headache that is inherent to their whole deal, which is the slippery slope of repackaging copyrighted material. If I think of the next echelon after that, it's probably the accounts with hundreds of thousands of subscribers whose videos consistently rake in close to 100,000 views and sometimes more. This would be your Carousels, your Tennis Brothers, again, like touring pros, NTRP 7.0s, better than the average person can even imagine being. Patrick Mouratoglou is also in this echelon, extremely prominent tennis coach, known for coaching Serena Williams and other absolute top players, and he has more than enough of a financial platform on his own to sink some cash into marketing and production and things like that. Top Tennis Training also tends to be in this echelon, and that channel also advertises the inclusion of top players, with its main heartbeat being coaches who used to be on tour in the money. Micah Babel may reach this echelon someday, and based on my experience with her, I hope she does. Then there's the next echelon, channels in the hundreds of thousands of subscribers or less, whose videos do not receive a consistently lucrative engagement level. 10 Fit Men, Intuitive Tennis, Michael Babel currently, Essential Tennis. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, but I believe your channel might be the most subscribed tennis coaching channel on YouTube that isn't run by a former touring pro.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
Yeah, and it's a tough thing to know for sure. Like, someone in the comments might know that offhand. And with that said, Ian, feel free to not answer this at all, or answer however you want, or just say, check the description for links to videos where I've already talked about this very transparently. between your fairly large YouTube channel with consistent uploads, your website, your merchandise, your book sales, everything that comes together to make up the business of Essential Tennis, how secure of a business experience is it for you?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, a lot has changed over the last couple of years, and big picture. Yeah, so I've been doing this for, I feel like such an old man, and I guess I kind of am. In internet terms, I'm like 200 years old. I started uploading videos in 2009, and it wasn't until we passed 100,000 subscribers in like 2016 or 17. And we were ahead of all the Grand Slams and Tennis TV and all the rest of it in subscribership,
Wow.
which by the way, doesn't really matter. And it's just like a vanity metric, especially for people that have been around for a long time. Like just because you have a lot of subscribers does not mean you're going to get any views on your video. And just because you have little subscribers doesn't mean you're not going to get a ton of views on your videos. Like there's really not much correlation. And so incredibly, we were like the top subscribed to tennis channel among like professional media outlets and like everybody until like 2018. We started getting past 2019. I think we were still ahead of the US Open and like the French Open. And the last couple of years, like post like pandemic and lockdowns and stuff like that, so much more has just transferred over to, you know, internet centric focus. So yeah, financially, to answer your question directly, I mean, at our peak, I won't get into like specifics, but in our peak year was 2019. That's when Kevin and Megan and Kirby were all on staff. We had 3 full-time video editors and production people, and we had our own private tennis court. We had cool like office space, you know, downtown Milwaukee. We were a 7-figure a year business in 2019, and this year we are going to do less than half of. No, I take that back. It'll be around half the revenue that we were at our peak. So to answer your question directly, the last 4 years have been a continual exercise of cutting for me, and that means personnel, team members, payroll. It means equipment investment. It means traveling. It means tools and, you know, online and physical, you know, gear and resources and coaching and consultants and like figuring out a way to, as the revenue has, you know, decreased, figuring out a way that I can continue to support my family. I have a wife and I have 2 kids that are all home full time. My wife has always homeschooled. My 2 kids are 14 and they're 11. So navigating that's been really tough, but hopefully nobody hears me complaining about that. It's the reality of business, and it's especially the reality of business on the internet, where because my livelihood is supported by whether or not people watch, people's preferences and tastes and interests can fluctuate like so fast, and people are always on the lookout for what's new. And I am the least new tennis creator out there, still continuously uploading stuff. And so it just kind of comes with the territory, and it's been hard, honestly. It's been frustrating, but I remind myself multiple times a day to continue to be grateful and feel blessed for what I have, because I still get to do like what I love every single day, regardless of how many people are around me and how like fancy we are. But it's been a challenge for sure. I don't know. Did I answer your question, or did I leave anything? Did I leave anything out there?
No, that was amazing. That was very thorough. That gave me a lot of like. There were some surprises in there. I actually had no idea that you were one of the absolute like leading channels for tennis on YouTube for a while, and that's good to know. And that's something that I would like maybe people to keep in mind as I continue here. Like even when I'm saying this, it might be under the like with a grain of salt, because the tennis YouTube community is actually kind of young, if that's the case, where like the absolute biggest media outlets were also kind of growing at the same time as things like Essential Tennis late in the 2010s. And I'm very glad that you were able to have the amount of success that you have had, especially in 2019. In terms of it not being as successful since and it being challenging and frustrating, you're not alone. If we go back to just your YouTube channel, your Echelon of Tennis YouTube is full of tennis lifers desperately trying to scrape together wads of income from the sport they're giving their lives to, dancing like marionettes at the unfeeling and unforgiving whims of algorithms, clinging to the subscribers they've managed to obtain along the way. And the subscribers aren't anything, as you mentioned, but that's in industries like this, trying to have any means of consistency, any means of stability is so crucial. And tennis doesn't really have that new, fresh, homegrown personality on the forefronts of the airwaves, making a good living out of the thing they love. Winners only might get there someday. They're kind of they're dancing that dance right now, but they have a long way to go to be able to like get to that making a living out of it stage. I look at other activities and I don't have to usually look very far to find those success stories. Gaming, Jomboy, Momentum, MLW Wiffle Ball, Como Blitzball, Adam Bobro, Pongfinity. Ian, upon a first look, Wimbledon's official channel was the biggest YouTube channel I could find in the tennis world at more than 2 million subscribers. A table tennis entertainment channel has doubled it in subscriber count. Doubled! Table tennis channels are doing way better than almost everyone in tennis. And yes, they're pros, but most of their content isn't about that at all. It's very well done videos of goofy challenges and fun entertainment. If you want an example of people making a living out of YouTube, peek at golf YouTube for 10 seconds, and you don't have to be a top pro or even close to a scratch golfer to be living that life. Look at Bob Does Sports. I watched a video with one of the members of that channel playing golf and being interviewed, the notorious Nick Stubbe, nicknamed Fat Perez, who is a scratch golfer, though that term comes with its own comment section arguments. But anyway, at one point he was asked, do you think we could see this sort of YouTube channel happen with other sports like, I don't know, bowling or tennis? And my initial reaction was just to smile to myself because I've seen those tennis channels for years. Tennis YouTube is already totally a thing. But then it begs the question, why not tennis? Where's our breakout star? Tennis is a big mainstream sport. Why aren't any grassroots tennis YouTube channels successful like Jomboy or Bob Does Sports? A person may first say, well, channels like Bob Does Sports have a ton of production value and natural charisma. They have like 4 cameras at all times. They've got all the right equipment. There's great commentary. They bring in special guests. It's a whole to-do, and there's no channel like that for tennis. You're right, there isn't. Not anymore. There was one. It was called Real Tennis, and it's being shut down because nobody cared about it. I'm struck quickly by 2 possible rebuttals to that statement. There may be many more, like, but Seirea, I cared about Real Tennis, and yes, I know it had its supporters, and I see you, but unfortunately it wasn't enough because far too few of us did care in a way that kept it alive. That's a different train of thought. For now, these 2 rebuttals are the first to come to mind that I would address. For one, you may say, and I'm talking to general hypothetical you, not Ian, that's not the same thing. Channels like Bob Does Sports bring in actual top pros. Real Tennis never did that. And my question to you would be, so do you only think something should be well supported if it involves the most elite participants in the world? If your answer is yes, the next question I'll ask pertains to that mindset as well. The other thing I imagine you might say about Real Tennis not being lucrative is that channel didn't earn the support to become a break-even venture, let alone a gainful one. And you could provide any reasons under the sun, including but not limited to, I didn't agree with the commentary or find it interesting, there weren't enough engaging people there, the players were all misrated and or lacking. There weren't, they promoted boring defensive tennis. They didn't upload enough. They used clickbait tactics.
Clickbait.
It may have been called real tennis, but I know real tennis, and that channel was not it. And my question to you would be, if that's how you and so many others like you engage with tennis, is there any wonder why tennis is dying? And look, that's both sensationalized and tumbling into finger-pointing territory. I know it is. And this is where part of me would love to take off the gloves and rant. Let it all hang out. After I found out about real tennis shutting down, bullet point after bullet point just kept flying into my head, one after another. Sudden clarity. All of my observations in the years I've spent in the tennis world, which in fairness is probably still less time than you out there have spent in tennis. I haven't been directly involved with the sport nearly as long as people like Ian. But the time I have been in tennis, I've spent in the thick of it, working the tennis center job, watching juniors grow, watching beginner adults join USTA, watching everyone of all skill levels come through, going to ATP Challengers, going to Cincinnati, watching USTA matches, going to USTA sectionals to support Mark Sanset, being a tennis YouTuber basically from the very beginning of my time in the sport in 2018, being in the midst of how tennis people process each other across the world. When I see one of tennis's brightest experiments quickly dying due to lack of support, it's hard to not want to connect that to the big picture I've pieced together. It makes sense to me, and I hate that it does. Full disclosure up front, I don't have the answers. I only have observations and my views. And one of those views is the reason why I won't sit here and let loose about the community's failings while I rattle out all of my impassioned bullet points. Yes, I'm frustrated that the community seems to have designed itself so poorly for unity and growth, but I have trouble believing that me adding to the contention and judgment in the tennis community would help anything. I'm pretty new to this. I'm a relatively young person, and I do not claim to have anything figured out, but I don't see how being another example of divisiveness in the tennis community would help. The world is already so divided and draining. Tennis is supposed to be fun, isn't it? A way to forget all that stuff? And yes, I have absolutely seen the good in the tennis community all the time. I've met so many awesome people. I see a ton of support and constructive criticism in the online spaces. People like Dill Plays are organizing independent events so players can come together. And most of the people I've gotten to play with are super easy to be around. And as I've mentioned, my channel gets so much positive stuff going on all the time. I have such a great little mini community, and I'm so grateful to everybody. I really, really, really am. And I know that in general, when tennis or anything is a big part of your life, you come to accept all of the less perfect stuff that comes with it, or even learn to ignore it. And when I say all of this, know that I have come to accept it, but I've also seen the rot, and I can't unsee it. I wonder if it killed real tennis. Why would new people want to be part of a culture where so many of us are pointing fingers instead of pushing each other to success? I only see evidence of that culture hurting tennis. Evidence is a strong word, of course. It's all circumstantial, it's all theorizing, but it makes sense to me, and I hate that it does. Because if we again use YouTube as a microcosmic example, viewership is often incredibly spread out and diffused. I used to think that that was really cool, and honestly, I still kind of do. Quote unquote, random channels with random videos get tens of thousands of views all over the place. I've been one of those channels. I've mentioned it before. For some reason, the tennis community likes to hang a lot of its focus upon the scattered fields of random tennis matches. And I say for some reason, but it quickly becomes really difficult to doubt one of the main reasons the moment you go into those videos' comment sections. When I say this, I legitimately don't mean to patronize, but it stands to reason that channels like Real Tennis could get to exist if the tennis community spent a bit more effort coming together to support those things, instead of spending most of that time and energy racing around strangers' videos and lamenting how wrong all of it is. The stated skill levels, the style of tennis, the funny-looking serve, the shirt one of the players is wearing, the players' attitudes. And look, that's not wrong. It's all free speech. Everyone's allowed to say what they want. And so much of the tennis community seems to want to prove a point, that they know real tennis, and they need to point out when things don't fit their ideal, because maybe that way someone will listen and tennis could get to be a little bit more like it should be. Feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm putting words in your mouths, but so many of you are proud. You have pride in yourselves, you have pride in your beliefs, you have pride in what tennis means to you. You care about that existing. You care about it being upheld or contradicted. You take it so seriously because it matters to you. And look, life is short and doesn't get us to care this much about just anything. For whatever reason, this matters to you and you want to fight for it. I understand that. And that's what I'm seeing so often. There's so much fighting. Line calls, score disputes, rule disputes, court behavior, parents in the stands. And look, every sport has this. Conflict is a part of human nature. I get that. But tennis is a pretty special sport, and it's a unique case. It's such a fluid thing. Think about it. In the last 40 years, it's gone through a gigantic overhaul in its global style of play. There's a critical wave of culture shock still reverberating throughout the sport. That's one of the common topics of contention. The generations from tennis's biggest boom of popularity are still playing, and they're coming into contact with all of the new generations, and everyone expresses themselves on the tennis court differently. It's harder for tennis players to naturally want to support other tennis players. It's an individual sport, and everyone fell in love with a different ideal of what tennis is, and they do love that, and they want to fight for that. And existing players and prospective new players alike, kids and adults, look at tennis and they see all the fighting, and then they look over at the pickleball courts and they see people actually having fun. But wait, before you roast me over the coals for that, I've watched the pickleball world roll into my tennis club as well. I have experience with it too, and its community in many ways is a spin-off of the tennis community. It has more accessibility and novelty and excitement, but it has a lot of the same conflict and judgment and contention. I wouldn't be surprised if it eventually faces a lot of similar rot to what faces tennis now. And if that's your first thought, if you're actively vying for pickleball to fail, I just sort of wonder why. Why are you spending your energy dragging down the sport you hate instead of supporting the sport you love? Why are you training the YouTube algorithm to promote scattered tennis videos you hate by commenting about why you hate them instead of steering the algorithm toward the tennis people you love? Look, that's all big talk, and I know it. Even if I truly thought the cool parody of viewership on tennis YouTube should end, we can hardly hope to control the algorithms anyway. And I may be a bit of a hypocrite in all this, because all of that definitely sounded like I'm pointing fingers after all. And I'm trying to force answers on people. And I understand if that offends you, but that's not my goal. I genuinely don't mean to be contentious or judgmental when I say all those things, because I've made peace with this. I'm not angry, not anymore. I may still wonder about all those things, but I've accepted the tennis community and I'm having fun. I love tennis. I'm not switching to pickleball. I love tennis. That's why I'm feeling that same instinct to fight for my ideal of it too. But I'm not here to change this sport. I don't think I could really make that big of an impact if I wanted to. And I'd rather just be myself and play some tennis and try to get less bad at it. I don't currently see myself ever joining USTA. I might, but I don't see myself doing it right now because I've seen hundreds of league matches. And while it's still predominantly a good thing with people celebrating tennis, I've seen that the whole experience probably isn't my cup of tea. I found a pretty okay niche, just hitting and setting up casual matches and getting to connect with people like Ian every now and then. And you can dismiss all of this if you want, because what you're hearing is that I'm a snowflake who only wants a tennis experience where everyone's blowing sunshine up my behind, and I'm not going to fight to try to change your mind. I'm accepting my place here, and I accept you. I'm not here to change you, any of you. I'm not here to be universally loved either. I used to want that. I used to destroy myself trying to please everyone, but I'm slowly accepting that I can't. I'm just here. And even if the tennis community has frustrated me, and even if I'm kind of an odd fit for it, I still love it anyway. Much like all human beings, especially me, tennis is imperfect. I'm okay with that. And we can probably work with that. We may not seem to be the best sport at working together, but tennis is an individual sport after all. Maybe part of what we love about it is the fact that a big net divides us. Maybe that's okay. And while I may be mourning real tennis, I'm so excited to see what the tennis world has in store for years to come. I appreciate that you've listened to my thoughts. That's my rant. And thanks for waiting, Ian. Thank you for your patience.
I think you need to do you have a mic somewhere that you can drop?
I have my phone, which has an OtterBox, which means like it will last longer than the universe. Like OtterBoxes are the most powerful thing of all time, and I'm not even sponsored.
Lots to unpack there, man. Where do you want to start?
That is honestly kind of part of where I leave this to you, because you do have more experience with all of this than me. Because I'm genuinely curious, like when I first kind of brought all this together, I told you that I was worried that it was like going to be off base, that I was barking up the wrong tree, because yeah, these are just my observations in kind of a short period of time. This is like my initial view of tennis, where I was like going through a period of my life where I was changing a ton as a person, and kind of my worldviews were changing, and I was sort of viewing the entire world this way, where I was disappointed by a lot of things because I had way too high standards of life in the world growing up. And I kind of built myself around really ridiculous standards and things that like the world couldn't possibly uphold for me. And in a way, like I love my experience with the tennis community, even though I talk about the frustrations and I bring up all these points. I think it's like a perfect way for me to accept, like to practice accepting the entire world and how things aren't just absolutely perfect, and that everybody's different and the world is divided, and like I can learn to be okay with that. The tennis community is like a perfect microcosm to accept. And so it's actually felt ridiculously freeing to do that. But where would, and yeah, I keep deferring to you because I'm a very deferential person, where that's me kind of going out of my comfort zone, me actually talking forcefully about things, being assertive. What's the first thing that jumps up to you? What would you start with?
Well, I really resonate a lot with, I mean, pretty much all of that. And you and I exchanged a couple of texts before we jumped on this call, and I could sense your hesitancy and maybe concern that maybe you were, way off base. And I don't think you are at all. Having been in the tennis world for 30 years now, and being part of the tennis industry for over 20 years, and being a content creator for 15 of those 20 years, I've had a very, very similar journey to you, Seirea, in the sense that I'm obviously a consumer of content myself, and so I have my own little passions and interests aside from tennis. And it's impossible for me as a very competitive person and as somebody who cares for we would need hours to unpack why tennis is so meaningful to me. And
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a deep, childhood psychology, level of like why I care so deeply for the game and for the sport. And so it's hard for me to put everything that I have into the game and want to be successful and want to grow a team and want to support my family and want to make a difference and impact as many people as positively as I can in the world, and look at the numbers and the hours invested, and then very much like you, look around to other topics and niches and affinity groups and see that the level of like success all around the internet and other topics is just eclipses what happens in the topic of tennis. And so I don't think you're off base at all. And part of me, like the pragmatic side of me and like the free market, economy, side of me feels like, well, ultimately it's up to me. Like I need to be the one that takes responsibility for how valuable and insightful is the information I'm sharing, how engaging and entertaining am I able to make it to hold people's attention. And ultimately, I think the buck stops with me as far as creating content that can be as widespread as possible and be as impactful as possible. And yet, if I can try to step back and be as objective as possible and see how much I've invested versus other channels and other topics, that I follow, it's not, and it shouldn't be. Listen, at the end of the day, there's no reason why we deserve to have tennis be as popular or mainstream or widely consumed or however else like you want to describe it. That's just life, right? Like none of us are ever guaranteed equal results for equal effort, and that's just the way the world works. But it's still hard to wake up day after day and have it be my vocation and how I spend most of my time and energy, and look around and see that the lever seems to be much larger that other people are pulling. Pongify is a perfect example. I've been watching Pongify videos for years, and they'll publish a tennis video that gets like more views in a day than the whole tennis space like combined on
Exactly.
YouTube from a ping pong channel. And I actually follow several ping pong creators, and they do an incredible job. But yeah, I'll probably kick it back over to you here for you to reflect. Like, I have lots of other thoughts about you. You brought up, I think, super valid. I just had this conversation. I was in Hawaii all last week coaching, and the assistant coach that traveled with me, we had a pretty long talk about how you to excel in an individual sport, you kind of have to be a little bit of a psychopath.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be to be the solo, person that goes out there. Like you have to believe deep down, to a degree. And there's different personalities, and this is a spectrum, right? But at least a little bit, you have to really kind of believe that you're special, and you're the chosen one, and you are better than. And I think you spread that out across, millions of people across the world. And I think there's something to that idea of that attitude kind of perpetuating a little bit and then making its way into the culture and making its way into the content and making its way into the comment section. And it's not like the internet is getting any less, toxic or any less polarized. So, you add that fuel to the fire, and on paper, I think it all kind of adds up and it all kind of makes sense. But that doesn't make it any less, it doesn't make me want any less to have just as much exposure and success for people in the tennis space as frickin' ping pong. Is that too much to ask? Apparently, apparently it is. It is too much to ask.
That's such an amazing point. That is definitely illuminating. Yeah, because that makes all of this make even more sense and kind of help me accept it even better. The fact that you say that, yeah, especially in an individual sport like tennis, you kind of have to be that way. You have to like back yourself that much. You have to take yourself that seriously in order to kind of be mentally successful, to give yourself the best chance to win and to like kind of vibe with the sport. And I feel like that's actually a great point to talk about my struggles with tennis, because I'm so not that way. I'm so naturally a self-effacing, and I give everybody else credit, and I always see my flaws and my faults and my double faults and everything. And as a result, I think that's been a large part of my plateau in a lot of ways in my sort of main skill level, in my ability to win tennis matches against players is part of me not being. I'm definitely a psychopath, but just not in that way. And so I need to learn how to develop that, because with tricking, with my acrobatic sport, I did have a lot of that confidence, and it was just sort of more innate. That was the thing. Like I was that way with playing trombone, and so that led me to principal chair and honors bands and the high school and college and a lot of different things, because I was that type of psychopath with it, where I believed I was that person. I believed in myself that hard, and tricking was the same way. I became like one of like a pretty like top 1% ish in the world with tricking, because I was that way with it, because I didn't put any limits on myself. All I ever thought about was, I'm going to get this no matter what. And with tennis, it's been very different. Like I entered tennis with the highlight focused mindset of tricking, where a lot of my goals with tricking was to get clips so that I could make videos out of them and make compilations and then share those with the world, and then have that proof that I did this. And you sort of naturally gain the consistency with those abilities on the way of trying to get those clips. Tennis is not that way, where I got a lot of the highlight clips, and then on the way to getting the highlight clips, I developed a lot of bad habits, and I would get the clip and it's like, yes, I did it, and I can make the video now. And then I still am not good at tennis because I just was swinging hard at the ball, and then sometimes it worked. So it's been really interesting. And it's easier, like going back to one of your initial points when we switched over to you there, it is definitely easier probably for me to accept tennis and just sort of like say, c'est la vie, all of this is absolutely fine with me. Even though I see all this happening, I don't feel any worse for wear about it, because like I am not wanting to present myself when I say, where is tennis's big breakout star? I'm not saying that should be me at all. Like that's not what I'm here to do. Again, I'm just here. I'm just doing my thing. I'm just having fun. I'm just doing what I feel like. I'm not here to get 1 million+ subscribers and get millions of views on all my videos and make a living out of this. I'm not saying that I should be that person, and not even really desiring that makes it probably easier for me to kind of be okay with all this than it is for you. You're one of the lifers. You're one of the people, as you said, who is putting like everything into this. And you're watching so many other things in life get way more success with similar input. You know, like they're getting way more output than you are. And yeah, that's again like already I'm feeling great about this, because I've gotten a really awesome perspective from you.
So let me ask you this, and I have my own, just off the top of my head, theory. Why do you, and so I'll be happy to tell you my thoughts, but I'm curious what you think first. It would be pretty easy to make the argument that, would you call tricking an individual, like it's not a team sport, right?
Correct.
And with trombone, obviously, like you're playing in a band, so in a sense it's a team sport. But like you pointed out, there's only one, chair of one, and there's 2, 3, 4, And if you're a competitive person at all, then it's just gonna kind of lend itself to you trying to like climb that ladder. And so it
Exactly.
becomes a very like individualized, in a micro kind of sense, kind of becomes an individual activity. So what do you think? Why is it that among the 3 different individual kind of activities that you just listed, that tennis has the worst vibe in terms of like the community, feel, the culture, the condescension, the judgment, the level shaming, like whatever you want to call it. Why do you think tennis is different in that way compared to those other individual kind of activities?
I think some of the things I mentioned there, where there's so many generational gaps, there are so many like different cultures within the sport itself, and everybody sees tennis completely differently. Because something I mentioned a while back, like I mentioned this to you when I visited you in 2021, was I have always kind of seen tennis as a form of artistic expression. Because every single shot that you hit, you get to decide where the shot goes, and every single point feels like brushstrokes on a canvas. Like that's part of the reason why people appreciate the absolute top level so much, is because so many of the individual points are so incredibly appealing to look at. They're so artistic. People like you have that duo of points between Federer and Nadal at the Australian Open finals, like 2009 and 2017. They had those. It almost came full circle where they had those ridiculous points, like 20 plus shots, where there was this unbelievable squash shot from the corner. And then the first one, Nadal wins with a half volley forehand from the baseline. And then the second one, Federer wins with a half volley forehand from the baseline. Tennis just has that incredible artistic quality to it. And that's part of what drew me to it. For my entire life, like playing Mario Tennis when I was a little kid, and vaguely for many years saying I should follow this sport because it's so cool, and I should start playing this sport because it's so cool. And it took me so long to actually like cross that gap and actually do it. I started watching tennis all the time, pretty often in 2013, and started watching it religiously in 2016 and 2017, and then I finally started actually playing in 2018. And like again, like I wanted to take that tricking quality of like making like artistic videos out of it, and I tried to like become a tennis player where that was the goal, and it was just different. And yeah, like that was part of like discovering how different the activity was, where like I couldn't just like fit a square peg into a round hole with tennis. Like I had to come to terms with that. And just the fact that tennis is such a traditional and established and storied worldwide sport. It's a major sport. And so you've got everybody from all walks of life, every single viewpoint coming together, and they're all interacting on the internet. And so you're just naturally going to have a lot of that, a lot of the friction. And tricking and music are the same way too. But like I've mentioned with tricking in the past, it is an individual thing, but it's a different culture because everybody's coming together to lift each other up. And that's part of, I think, probably what helped me get so good at it, was because I had an incredible region. Northeast Ohio was an absolutely legendary and one of the absolute best premier regions in the entire world. That's part of what made me one of like the top 1%, probably top 100, maybe even top 50 trickers in the world at my peak, was because I had a really good microcosm of a good culture for people supporting each other. And tennis, everybody's trying to beat each other. And music, again, like it's kind of like that. You're competing to get the top chairs, but still everybody's coming together to make the same music, and so you have to support each other and work together. And tennis is just like you're all trying to beat each other. And so like I think most people, when they're playing tennis against each other, against total strangers that they've never met before, they go into the matches with the general sense of I want to be cordial. I want this to be a good experience. I don't want any smoke. And just I think it's more natural for it to go away from that because it's so competitive, and because in order to try to win, you have to sort of go into the psycho mode. And yes, I do absolutely think, like, once you brought that up, oh, it's so understandable that would bleed into every other part of the sport, like the online spaces, the communities. That makes so much sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think you touched on some important things there that I'd like to try to tie together a little bit quickly. I think one of the biggest strengths of tennis, and the top reason why I'm not completely pessimistic about the whole pickleball and padel and tennis like dynamic, is because of the incredible history and like traditions of the game. Like, it's just unmatched by any other paddle or racket sport. And also because of that, like, hundreds of years of history and tradition, we have these legacy heroes of the game that had legendary skills and aesthetic that we kind of like worship and we look up to, and we aspire to be able to perform and look kind of the way. And there's any one of us who've never seen ourselves on video, it's easy to fool ourselves into thinking that we're kind of in the ballpark. And it's like, oh yeah, that must be kind of like close, right? Like, oh, that was a winner, like down the line. It's probably looks like how Sampras like did it, or how Borg did it, or how Steffi Graf did, or Serena or whoever. So we have this like aesthetic pinnacle that all of us are striving for. And yet, when you go play the game of tennis, rather than being a supportive, and I like your examples about tricking, it kind of, as you've talked about tricking, I don't know anything about skateboarding really, but I've been going to skate park with my kids a bunch recently. They have like their like little razor scooters, and there's a little like separate like section, and I like to sit and watch the skateboarders like collaborate together and like encourage each other, like exactly the way you're talking about.
Very similar culture. Yep.
Yeah, it's totally reminding me of skateboarding, in the sense that you kind of hope that the other badass, boarder at the skate park like nails X, Y, or Z trick, so that it like inspires you to keep pushing, like to make yourself better.
Yep.
At no point when the other like incredibly talented skateboarder at the park is like lining up for like some sweet like trick, does somebody run in with their skateboard and freaking clobber him over the head and like be like, yeah, like in your face. Like, there is no head-to-head unless you go to like the X Games or whatever. But even then, it's subjective. It's scored. Like, there's judges. There's nobody like trying to mess up their opponent through gamesmanship, or maybe there's some of that like behind the scenes. But there's no active head-to-head psychological warfare. There's no active head-to-head technical destructive efforts. That's what tennis is. I think like we're trying to actively destroy our opponent's technique, proficiency, their consistency, their balance, their comfort, their whole like emotional state and psychological well-being. Like, we're trying to dismantle all of that. Like that's how you win at tennis over and over again. So I think when you combine the lore of like elite world-class like frickin' like culture-changing like icons like Agassi and Arthur Ashe and like again like Serena, like people who impacted not just tennis but like fashion and civil rights and like incredible, right? And then we aspire to that without really understanding that they're at rung a million of that ladder. And I'll just speak for myself, like having been around the tennis world my entire life, and I've been very blessed to have a lot of experiences as a spectator, as a collaborator, as a coach or leader in instructional situations, as a college athlete. I've had lots of direct and indirect experiences where I feel very blessed to fully know my place in the world as like as a athlete and as somebody who like tries to play good tennis. And I know that I'm so far away from the top of that ladder. I'm on rung like 1,120 out of a million, where Agassi and Arthur Ashe and Serena and Steffi Graf and all those people are up at the top. But your average tennis player does not have that humbling perspective. And so I think you combine the aesthetic and like the heroes and the natural, like destructive nature of trying to win at tennis, and the gigantic gulf, huge gap that players have in their perception, their self-awareness relative to the rest of the game. And you put all that like in a melting pot and you mix it around, and I think it's just a frickin' recipe for toxicity. And yeah, this is my first time kind of out loud connecting all these dots, and it's making more and more. The more I hear you talk and the more I kind of reflect on what you're saying, the more it's almost kind of making sense to me. What are your thoughts on any of the combination of like all those different things?
I'm in very much agreement, and I respect that you're coming out and saying this, because like you're in a position where you're trying to be as you have to be as diplomatic as possible all the time in order to like because of your brand, and so that you can have people like want to engage with you and everything. I respect that you're coming out and saying these things, and I'm sure that you're not like you're saying these things and you're not trying to like ostracize anybody, like to try and
No.
make anybody feel like they're doing anything
It is
wrong.
what it is.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just part of tennis. It's part of the sport we love. It's part of the culture that we're so into. Yeah, and also like to add to what you were saying about like these culture changing icons and the people falling in love with them and like wanting to like kind of gear their own game after that ideal of tennis. And then when tennis changes, because tennis is one of the most changing sports I've ever seen, then it feels like that is being lost. It feels like everything that person loved, like that incredible player that was their entire everything of the sport, is like being left behind. And that's got to be such a tough feeling, and I might experience that someday. Tennis might change critically again, and then nobody ever plays like Federer again. Nobody ever plays like even Alcaraz again, and that'll be something I have to go through. But yeah, it's if it helps to soften that for anybody, like Sampras is one of my favorite players. I still watch videos of him all the time. And I love watching videos of Becker and so many players from the 70s and 80s, Connors and McEnroe. Like, I love watching that. I think it's still going to be, it's still got a lasting impact. All of that tennis is still alive. Not a lot of people may still play like that, and the technology may have made that exact style of play basically extinct, but it's still alive. And it's still absolutely, like, this is a word that I think gets overused, but it's still incredibly and perfectly valid. It's still tennis. It's just the entire landscape of tennis is different now, and it has a different place in that.
Yeah, the landscape is different, but on the professional side, it's still almost impossible to be a professional tennis player. And there's still tens of millions of players all around the world that still idolize that tiny, 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 like 0.0000001% of like humanity that can actually make a living doing it. And that's an incredible thing. Like, that's amazing to be able to have those idols to look up to. But I think, ironically, it can also be part of what fuels some of the attitudes that are out there. Because at the end of the day, tennis is one of the most objective games there is. Like the ball, well, you take out cheaters from the equation, and the ball either like landed inside the lines and you won, or it didn't and you lost. And ultimately, you know, whether I use this side of the racket to hit the ball or this side of the racket to hit the ball, it really doesn't matter as long as the ball goes inside the lines. And yet there's this like classism that exists because of how incredibly talented the top players are. And we all, like I said before, we all kind of have this image in our mind of us looking like our favorite player when we hit like the best shot we hit that day. And so subjectivity ends up sneaking its way into the minds and into the equation of how people talk about who's a good player and who's a bad player, and like who I want to be my partner and who I don't. And that all, I think, really creates a really negative environment. But it shouldn't. It really should just come down to who wins and loses. Like, it should just be as simple as that. She's better because she beat me. But that is so far from the truth in the minds and out of the mouths of like 99% of tennis players. And it's so sad because it could be a supportive, you know, building up kind of community. But instead there's so much fixation on the subjective, there's so much fixation on the aesthetic that it really robs a lot of people from the experience they should have when they win, when it's not the way everybody thinks that they should have swung the racket, which is ridiculous, but that's really the way that people act.
The pusher topic is really revealing, and
yeah,
I do think, yeah, that it is like you can see that at the way people interact with all levels of tennis, because the people are the same way with kind of trying to validate anybody who's ever played the game at the top level, where I personally like this. Oh man, I'm not going to talk about who I think the GOAT is, but maybe I am, because I'm going to say I don't think it's Federer.
Things are about to get toxic.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh no. Federer is my favorite player. Federer is my favorite player. I don't think that he's the greatest of all time. And I think the GOAT discussion, just like, it's kind of like a different version of the pusher discussion in a way, because people think that they present the topic of the greatest of all time like the greatest of all time is the only player that ever mattered. Like people
yeah, totally.
talk about Federer or Nadal or Djokovic being the greatest of all time. So,
and if you don't agree with me, you're wrong.
Yeah, because if I'm wrong about my player being the greatest of all time, it means that he never mattered, or that she never mattered, and that I shouldn't, like, me liking them doesn't mean anything. And they kind of interact with that. It kind of distills downward from there. And talking about pros and their styles, like a more defensive player like clay quarters, like even professionals themselves talk about people who specialize on the clay courts, like that skill set and having the most success on clay and mostly playing clay tournaments and building a lot of their points in that way, like has a different validity than other players. Mm-hmm. Like even at the very top level, there's that discussion. And that distills down into the recreational level, where somebody sees a junk baller or a moon baller or a pusher, or of course, like one of the most illuminating parts of that illuminating topic was when MEP became very popular, when Tennis Trolls videos blew up and MEP became a sensation. Part of that sensation was the fact that, like, the only reason people are losing to him is because they are clearly not 4-5s. Like,
it must be the only reason, the only possible explanation.
Yeah, it's not that MEP is good at winning tennis points. It's that these players are failing, and MEP is ruining tennis. It's all so interesting to watch, and I think there's so many interweaving things at play that make all of this happen. And I think a lot of it is understandable, and a lot of it is probably harming the culture, but I still accept it. It's just taking some time.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, I like what you said earlier about how it's helping you unpack or kind of unwind some things about yourself that weren't necessarily healthy in the first place. It kind of forces you to be very introspective and embrace parts about yourself that maybe on the outside aren't valid or valuable, to other people. You kind of have to come to terms, and I know a lot about this, having published over 2,000 videos on YouTube. You have to develop a strong inner sense of like self and worth and value if you're going to be a tennis content creator, and frankly, even if you're just going to be a competitive tennis player and not a content creator, and you're even not exposing yourself to like the big world that is the internet. Because if you're not really solid and anchored in how you feel about yourself, there's unlimited people that are happy to hijack the thoughts in your own head with their own opinions.
Yes.
Whether you win a lot or not, like MEP is perfect, albeit an extreme example. It's a perfect example of people will do and say whatever they can to take away from his success, which is such a sad, and not everybody. It's not everybody, but so many people. It's such a sad thing. Seirea, I got about 10 minutes here before I need to jump off for another call. Any other big picture topics that we haven't touched on yet that you want to? And B, where are you at in your personal like development and journey? And maybe we won't have time for both. So maybe pick which direction you want to go in.
That's pretty easy. I'll pick B because I think we covered basically everything that I could have ever wanted to. This has been really cool. The last thing I'll say before I move on to B is that, I think that one of the common things of human nature is for people to cling to beliefs regardless of any evidence. It's just the need for something to be true no matter what. And that's something that you see in the pusher discussion, the MVP discussion, and all over the place. And that's just part of human nature. And that's another thing that I'm learning to accept through tennis. And I'm grateful for tennis for that. And I don't mean that ironically. I genuinely mean that. I'm grateful. So my tennis journey, my tennis experience, again, like I mentioned earlier, I've kind of plateaued a bit for the last, I have improved aspects of my game significantly since I met you in 2021. And there was especially I recorded a clip in later 2021 or early 2022 or something like that, where we were working on me running to the forehand side and hitting the ball cross court. And that was something that I was struggling to do consistently when I was with you. And I had a session later that year or early the next year where I hit 30 in a row in well angled, into that deep part of the court, that corner of the court. And I was going to include that as a before and after, because I never ended up making part 3 of our time together, which I might still do at some point, because I still have all the footage and I have more motivation these days for some reason. And I can, now that it's been more than 3 years, I can do an extreme before and after. But one of the things that I did was make 30 balls in a row there. And so I've noticed flashes of really good signs. And then I still lose to Z 6-2, 6-0, every time we play. And then I have that really illuminating, eye-opening experience of joining that lower level little round robin ladder league against players who were in 3-0 USTA leagues, and they put the ball in play and I didn't. And so there are always these good signs, and I look at myself, even that video that you were displaying in the background there this whole time, that was from 2023 in the summer. And I'm still noticing so many things I'm doing better, especially since I've been taking private lessons with a coach at the club that I work at, Towpath Tennis Center. And he's gotten me preparing for the ball so much better on both wings. The biggest thing this year that has improved is my footwork, taking so many little steps to the ball, getting better prepared all the time, and just so many good thoughts in my head as I'm preparing for shots. It's just putting it all together. Tennis is ridiculously hard. Tennis is like one of the absolute hardest things I've ever tried to do. And I think partially because I've picked it up so late in my life. So late in my life, I was 23 when I started, but starting as an adult, it's a tough sport to start when you're an adult, compared to when you're learning how to move as a child, when it's one of the things you're learning how to do as you're learning how to run and how to tie your shoes and everything. It's a lot different. And so it's a pretty unnatural sport for me to like make lasting progress with. And this is something I'm going to be touching on a lot in the videos that are going to be coming up on this channel. So I'm going to sound like a broken record a lot, but all this is always relevant. Unfortunately relevant, because I'm still kind of like, my progress is so slow, and I like I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of that is mental. And so that's going to be one of the harder things to work on, because it's a lot of the more intangible stuff, is the mental stuff. And I still need to actually read your book, and I think that will probably help me. And now that I'm in this like big, I'm really excited about tennis again, and I have a bit more energy about it. I might actually do that.
So I think my book is great. However, there's another book while you were talking that I pulled up. I'll put it up on the screen here. I used to give this book to every student that I worked with, and it's incredible. It is like a perfect, very succinct, like very quick read, perfect journey through how to get better at something complex and complicated. And your description just a second ago about plateauing is like a core like part of the message here in this book. And I'm going to strongly recommend that before you look at my book, you read this one, Seirea. It was incredibly enlightening for me to help me be a more effective coach. And I'm glad I was the thing I've been most happy to hear you say over the time that we've been talking just now is you said out loud, tennis is hard. And I wish more players would grasp the degree to which that's true, and the gravity to which, and like the respect and awe that players have for elite world-class professional, world-class like competitors is absolutely earned, but in a way should be even dramatically larger than it is. I think and like I said, I've been in the game of tennis for 30 years. I've been coaching the game for 20 years. And a day, I mean this literally, like no hyperbole, a day does not go by that I go out onto the court with either a student, like recently I haven't played tennis at all this year, but whether I go out as a player or whether I go out with a student, a day doesn't go by that some other dot doesn't get connected for me, and I appreciate and more fully understand the nuance of like the relationship between this thing and that thing like a little bit better, and my respect for how difficult of a thing it is that we're all trying to achieve to be a good tennis player, whatever that means, to everybody, wherever they stand with their rating or their level or their athleticism or their talent or whatever. Making it to the next level, wherever you happen to be right now, is a tremendously big ask of the universe. And I feel like I'm just starting to really understand that after 30 years of studying it. And so I hope you stick with it at least that long, if not twice as long, Seirea, because not only has my perspective on the game not tarnished, and not only has that deepening understanding not frustrated me, but it's just caused me to have more and more deep appreciation for what I can do. Frank, if anything, I've way overachieved in the game of tennis relative to the genetic tools that I had to work with when I first started playing. And I never would have come to that reckoning. I never would have come to that belief had I not spent all of these decades unpacking, like, how does this happen? And how can I do this better? And this player's been stuck with XYZ. How can I unstick them and get them to actually make progress and move forward? And it's only through tens of thousands of hours of trying to solve those problems that I'm where I am now, and I'm so grateful for where I am now. And I want nothing more than for you and everybody else listening and everybody else that loves the game of tennis to someday arrive at that same place of appreciation, because it brings a lot of freedom, and it brings like a much thicker skin, and it brings a lot more, in my experience, satisfaction and gratitude for even the bad days. It's much easier to find things to be grateful for when your perspective and your view of the game is more and more in line with reality. And the reality is tennis is unbelievably difficult to be good at. So I'm really happy to hear you say that, and I hope you read this book, and everybody else out there should read this book too. Any final thoughts, Seirea, before we wrap up?
Just to say that I think part of why I've been excited about tennis again and why I've been suddenly making videos again is that I think I'm starting, at least for now, to kind of find that peace with tennis and find that understanding. And like even though I had the like really like earth-shattering losses recently, I think that was part of what did it for me, and part of what gave me that understanding. And like even though I'm really far away from where I want to be skill-wise, where I would really like to be a 4-5 level USTA, something like a UTR 8 at some point.
You can.
And like be able to maintain that for a while. Being where I am now, I'm enjoying the game right now, and just sort of feeling at peace with a lot of things and feeling energized and like hopeful. I'm seeing like something I'm again going to be saying pretty often in these videos coming up on my channel is I have like the kind way to put things is I have so much room to improve, and I'm actually believing the excitement of that statement. Because once I get to like, if I ever do get to like a 4 or 5 level and consistently stay there, there won't be that much room for me physically to be able to get to improve past then. It's unlikely that I'd ever reach a 5-0 level. So I'm excited right now. I'm excited about the community. Genuinely, I'm excited about my game. And I'm excited I get to do things like this. Thank you so much. This has been really amazing.
Yeah, man. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm always excited to hear about your journey and where you're at, and I'm glad you haven't left it by the wayside. For whatever it's worth, I think you absolutely have 4-5 tennis in you, just in terms of your coordination, your athleticism. But it will be hard. We're talking about like 4-5 is top 6% of tennis players. So the fact that you're 1% at some other highly dynamic, athletic skill bodes extremely well for you. But it is a long path. There's no question about it. So what I love about the Mastery by George Leonard is the core thread that kind of ties everything together is the message of the sooner you can learn to love the journey more than you love some kind of destination or achievement, the more satisfied and happy and joyful you're going to be about that activity. And I couldn't wish more that everybody else watching this can more and more kind of embrace that outlook. I think it's the way to go in life, and certainly something as difficult as tennis. So I'm really happy to hear you say that, Seirea. Always feel free to use me as a resource anytime. Really enjoyed this conversation a lot. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
The last thing is just that I think outliving the honeymoon period with tennis. Again, huge. Another part of why I've had this resurgence is because I realized this is a lasting thing for me. the fact that I am past that early period where I'm so motivated and I want to get as good as possible, as fast as possible. And not only has that been as successful as I wanted, but it's been a long time since, and I'm still into it and I'm still fully like invested. I think bodes really well for me playing this for a long time. And I think it's a great sport to play for a long time. And again, I'm thankful to everybody who supports this channel. Thank you for everybody watching. And I hope that I didn't you know, ruin the experience by anything I said in this video for you. But I understand if that's the case. Everybody, I only want anybody to interact with me the way they want to, and enjoy this the way that you want to. So it's whatever you think about everything we said is totally fine. Feel free to add your thoughts in the comments if you wish. And thank you again, Ian. This is so awesome. It's really a pleasure to know you, and the natural diplomacy and sort of just the way that your mind works has always been part of what has drawn me to you as a creator and everything, and part of what makes it really easy to know you. So thank you for all of that. I think you're good for the sport.
Thanks, man. That means a lot. Thanks a lot for the conversation, Seirea, and curious to see how people respond to this video, or if anybody watches it. We'll find out, right?
yeah, we'll see.
All right, thanks, buddy. Keep up the great work on your game, and talk to you again soon.
Sounds great, man. Thank you.